Hi, I'm Leanne Ely. I'm a nutritionist, a New York Times best-selling author, and some people even say I'm a life coach. I started the Daily Dish Show to share my story, my truth, and my journey to vibrancy, and to inspire others to do the same. Because it's all about grit, perseverance, and finding a way despite the odds. It's about embracing the whole woman, not just the parts that are easy to love, and feeding her heart, mind, body, and soul. But I found that this isn't just my story, it's your story too. It's go time. This is the Daily Dish. So check it out at the show supplement of the week page. That's at savingdinner.com/show. All I can say, and I told Jenny I was going to say this, but I'm not going to say it. Yes, I am. If you are running low on anything, you would be so foolish to pass this by because it's a humongous saving, especially if you haven't gotten to the place of getting those cravings handled once and for all. And I'll tell you what, that's me. I take it every single day. Wouldn't be without it. Crave Pressure and Leptofix. And I also have a dish of L-glutamine right here because that's the kind of gal I am. So I'm just saying to you, check it out. savingdinner.com/show. That's where we put the supplements of the week. That's a big time deal. Big deal. All right? Did I say it was a big deal? It's a big deal. Hi, Jane. Joanne. Love it. Let's see. What else do we have? The books are available, by the way. Getting Off the Carousel of Crazy, the book and the workbook that goes with it. You can find that at savingdinner.com/crazy. This is where those books are, and they'll tell you all about it. Hi, Mimi. And guess what? I always sign them and personalize them right to you. Every single book gets signed. Every single book going out the door gets signed. I think it's important because I want you to be seen and feel seen because I love you and I care about you. Tonight, by the way, speaking of that, we're getting ready. Next week we sprint. Tonight is the webinar for the sprint. Who's coming? Pinkies up if you're coming. I would like to see you all there. savingdinner.com/sprint. We need to get a refreshment, get ready for it, and get things rocking and rolling. You got to do it. You got to do it. So that's going to be a big thing. So I really want you there. Check it out. savingdinner.com/sprint. Also Q&A. Always every single Friday. Send your questions in to support@savingdinner.com. And in that subject line, question for Leanne on Friday, so I can answer your questions. You have questions, right? Well, I might have the answer. If I don't, I will research it and bring it to you as best I can. That's what we do. Jerry, I know you ordered your book yesterday because I signed it this morning. I did. And I thought, good for Jerry. You know, she's getting it done. And I love it when I see people taking action on doing the next thing. And one of the next things that you can do, honestly, is really get your ducks in a row and start understanding what the Carousel of Crazy is all about. I promise you there's more than one. But this Carousel of Crazy that we're talking about is the one that women our age, most of us, women of all ages actually, have been sucked into this whole culture of dieting. We'll be talking about that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit today because that's part of our whole thing of turning mountains into molehills. It's all really about proper perspective. You know, that's what it's all about. And there is, when you look this up and you think, you know, what is this whole thing about turning molehills into mountains? Well, you know, the dictionary basically defines this as a personality disorder. It's histrionic, overreactive, and hand-wringy type behavior over just the smallest, littlest thing. You know, crazy time. You understand that. Hey, Denise, glad to see you. To be histrionic is to be over the top emotionally and just basically can't handle it. The smallest little thing, and it's just like, we've got to go. We got to get out of here. This is terrible. You know, so sensitive, so touchy. People walk around, being around you is like walking on eggshells. You ever said that about anybody? Have you ever known anyone like that? I sure have. And I've been married to, for 18 years to someone who it was an eggshell situation every single day. You never knew what you were going to get. That was a box of chocolates, right? To quote our friend Forrest Gump. Hi, Juanita. So we don't want to be this. I mean, you don't want to be over the top, emotionally crying over it, just about anything. You don't want to be over the top, emotionally, just hair trigger temper, and nobody can say anything to you because everything is just going to set you off. That's what histrionics are, and yeah, it's a personality disorder. But, I will also say that there's a personality disorder called personality disorder not otherwise specified. What's that? Isn't that kind of cuckoo? Hey there, Carol. So I don't dismiss the real study of these things. I don't dismiss the real study of psychological personality disorders and what have you. I think we're all slightly disordered, aren't we? I mean, we're not perfect. We're dysfunctional at best, aren't we? And we see things and do things according to the best filter system that we have, which is our lives. We're all confirmation biased, by the way. Every single one of us are. We all are. It's time to admit it and just say, yeah, that's how I roll. That's how I roll. So what? That doesn't mean, we're not the most objective people in the world. And we are all have impressions made on us through our childhood, through the way we see the world, through our worldview of how we've lived in this world. That's just how it is. And for some of us, we have open wounds and otherwise scarred over and healed up wounds that have caused us to be maybe a little knee-jerky in our reactions with things and through, our emotions and being unable to handle things. My mother was that, my mother was definitely like that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So while I'm not going to dismiss, personality disorders and what have you, I'm certainly not, because I'm not a doctor and I don't play one here on the Daily Dish either. And I'm certainly not, I'm giving you an opinion and not a professional, diagnosis, prognosis, or, even giving you a whole summary of what this is all about. But I will say this one thing from my perspective and from what I have seen and from being a nutritionist for over 27 years now and speaking with people who've been overly medicated and overly everythinged. I think what happens then is that big pharma and prescription happy doctors are having a heyday with people with all these disorders, And I read this one thing that I think is just really absolutely, it hit me between the eyes. And this is kind of why we're on this whole thing, that Jennifer Kunst, she's a psychologist. This is what she said about molehill transformations, shall we say, from molehills to mountains. She says, physically speaking, a molehill becomes a mountain when an animal takes dirt from somewhere and piles it on somewhere else. Psychologically speaking, if we think metaphorically that making a mountain out of a molehill essentially is a massive displacement of psychological dirt from one place to another. We unconsciously dig up dirty issues from one significant area of our lives and pile them onto something far more innocuous. I think this happens because it seems easier to pile a little bit of dirt somewhere else than deal with the psychological mountain itself, intimidating as that often is. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Did you see that? In other words, we deflect. In other words, rather than have to deal with something, we over-emote, we overly react, and we are highly reactive. We're not dealing with the core issue is the deal. We're getting into the whole thing, and that then becomes the attention. That then becomes the focus instead of what really is at the heart of the matter. Is this hitting you upside the head like a 2x4? I know it did me. And I was like, ooh, yeah, what do I need to look at? What am I doing here to bury and to distract and to unconsciously dig up the dirty issues of this area and not deal with all of this over here? Scary, right? So I thought, to me, that was like one of the biggest, juiciest, biggest, fattest pieces of information I have ever read, because this just shows this is how we as human beings deal with things. You know, we unconsciously are trying to just save face, feel better about ourselves, and then just pile the dirt up over here and make this over here, this teensy little molehill, into a mountain so that we don't have to look at what's over here. Makes it easy. So we're going to be talking about scaling back those mountains into molehills, starting really tomorrow. Right now, we're just kind of going to take a peek-see at what all this is about. And I think what the good doc is saying is how we inappropriately pile on for ourselves. We do. We displace our icky stuff, the stuff that we don't want to look at, and we create a diversion. A diversion. It's a diversion tactic, because having to face the real thing, well, what does that mean? That means it needs to be looked at, it needs to be analyzed, and it requires brutal honesty. We're looking at that in the eye and saying, I see you. I see you, Leanne. This is what it is, honey. So I think oftentimes that's what our overreacting is, honestly. It's very much connected to that old wound, or it's very much connected to something that's still an open wound. And it's never properly healed. And you know what happens? You've seen wounds that don't properly heal. If anybody's ever taken care of an elderly person who's got wounds that don't heal, they get worse and worse and worse, making the patient sicker, sicker, and sicker. And it gets to the point where there is no talking reason anymore. It's just a matter of keeping things calmed down. And my mother, I've told you before about her. She was the ultimate hand wringer, and she had a really sad childhood. When she was growing up, she was her parents got divorced, and my grandmother was a tea leaf reader. Believe it or not, that's what she did for a living in tea houses in Vancouver, BC. That's what she did. And my mother, because my grandmother had like these weird hours or whatever, this is what she was told anyway, was bounced from house to house and stayed with friends, oftentimes not staying with her mother. Very, very rarely saw her dad. And I believe she had a real huge, gigantic insecurity of just feeling like, am I going to be able to stay here and go to this school the next year, and this family? I remember her telling me about this family that she was staying with at the time. And it was this idea of seeing a mother and a father together sitting at the dinner table and having a meal together was such a big deal. That really impressed me. I mean, then I go on to create Saving Dinner, right? What the whole thing is, bringing families back to the dinner table. But my mother, and she was absolutely adamant about us sitting together down every night as a family for dinner. And I believe that the way that she handled things, I mean, I told you, she'd hand wring, and if everything didn't go perfectly, she would over catastrophize. She would say out loud, oh my gosh. And I mean, just absolute stress pouring out of her pores. And it was hard to be around. And when we were growing up, she was a yeller. And she would yell constantly. We weren't abused as kids. We weren't smacked around all the time and stuff. But my mother would yell and go off all the time because she had no coping mechanisms. She didn't. And I think it stems from this insecurity. Again, I'm putting out my my psychological, I play it on TV card here. But I really believe that it was from the instability that she had as a child, and I'm sure there was a whole lot more. And I'm sure there was a bunch of stuff too that she really never got into, because they didn't back then. So let me just say this. If you are looking at something in your life and saying, there's a little needle here, I'm feeling a little prickly, then maybe it's time for us to start looking at this collectively as a group and just agree that we all do this to some degree. I will just say that some folks. This is the sum total of how they live their lives. And then for the rest of us who are somewhere in the middle of this, it's like we can recognize old behaviors and maybe correct them along the way. But it's time to take note and say, okay, so how do I fix these parts of my life? Because I don't want to live that way where I have this hair trigger temper or I have this overly emoting blah, 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 blah. I don't want to live like this anymore. Can you imagine what it would be like to just always feel like people around you are walking on eggshells, or you're around somebody and you're constantly walking on eggshells and wondering what's going to tick them off this time? What's going to hair trigger them this time and make them say something? So I'm just going to say, if you're around people like that, then you know what I'm talking about. If you are one of them that creates this kind of drama and you're willing to take a peek-see at this, I got 4 things for you that I believe will help. Of course, at any time where you just feel completely out of control, I always recommend seeing a professional about this kind of thing and making sure you're really selective about who you go see, by the way, because there's a lot of people out there who, they're not good at what they do. I'm sorry, it's true. You want to make sure that they're good at what they do, and you want to be heard and not just prescribed. Amen. So instead of creating mountains out of molehills, I think it's time to move mountains. What do you think of that idea? How about moving some mountains? So let's talk about, what do we need to do? Number 1 is we need to stop, drop, and roll like you are on fire. And the reason why is when we can recognize we're about to overly create something big out of something small, we got to stop like we're on fire. We got to drop and put that fire out, and we got to roll and think. In other words, this is the whole thing of what it is that when we are in this place of just starting to just go off, our brain goes off and our mouth goes off too. And then we can't take that stuff back, and we think maybe later we regret it or whatever. But if I believe really, and this is how our brain operates, this is one of the things that I love about studying the brain, is that we go from the primitive brain all the way to the very most of all part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. This is where we abstract think. This is where we're able to understand and put things in perspective. This is where we take a minute to process. This is our mighty processor here. It's executive function is what they call it. But you can't executively function if you're constantly in the knee-jerk place. There is no executive function. It's all monkey brain doing the work. And all I'm saying is inviting you to feel like when something happens and you see it, instead of quickly opening your mouth and going, but you don't understand, stop and just say, I need a minute to process. I need some time. That's all you need to do. That's your exchange for your mouth going off. Instead, it's an opportunity to really think about it and to really process it and to allow your prefrontal cortex to do its thing. This is when then it gives you an opportunity to speak with control. It gives you an opportunity to speak intelligently and not just go off, because going off has never done anything to promote a good relationship or even a good feeling about yourself. It takes you down. It takes you down. And nobody wants to be around somebody who's prickly all the time. And nobody wants to be around somebody that you feel like you're walking on eggshells with, and the anxiety that produces. Is someone looking at you and saying the same thing, like being around her? It's like walking on eggshells. Think about that for a minute. Scary. So one of the ways and one of the most effective things that we can do is just stop, drop, and roll. Allow for the processing to happen, okay? And number 2, I'm going to throw something down that you're probably going to say, what are you talking about? Balance is a myth. Achieving balance in life is a myth. And am I right? It's true. You know why balance is a myth? I'm going to tell you right now. Because there are times in your life where you are all focused on one thing. Anybody who's ever had been in a bathtub at 3 o'clock in the morning with a fevered child, when it's cold outside and you're coolish in the bathtub trying to get a child's fever down, you understand there's no balance there. You're not getting your sleep. You are with that child, helping that child get their fever down. If you're taking care of an elderly parent, boy, do you know, there's no such thing as balance there. You try, we strive, but balance just isn't there. And I want you to be okay with that. It's when you put yourself out of balance because you're all, throwing yourself endlessly into games on your phone or into Netflix, that's a different thing. That's escapism and trying to numb out. But your life, there's going to be certain times where you can't do anything else. A couple of weeks ago, I guess it's been way over a month, Mark was, had to go he has a family cottage in Canada. And he needed to go up there. There were some tools and things that he needed to get because we're still working on our house as usual. It's going to be endless, I'm sure. And he also hadn't seen his sister. His sister's, well, let me say he's one of 7. So he hadn't seen his sisters and his brother and really wanted to get up there. And he was saying, you can work on the road, you can do this and you can do that. And I said, Mark, right now, and he said, you have to have balance. We have to have vacation. We have to do this. I said, I get it, but I want to tell you about this right now. There's no balance right now. My focus is we've got a book coming out. It's got to get finished. We've got this coming out. We've got that coming out. I got to be here. I can't be in sketchy internet land and going once a day. I said, I'll be so stressed out. It's not going to work. My focus needs to be wholeheartedly right now on what's coming up here, And I knew that if I had left, that I would just be an absolute basket case. My balance was off. But you know what? Balance is a myth. And there are times when we don't have a whole lot of things. I'm going to take a whole lot more time off. I'm going to record shows and you're not going to see me as much. Maybe live. But you understand what I'm saying? We got to look at this. Everything's always going to be out of whack. We focus on one thing one week, and then the next week things just are a little simpler. We think, hey, smooth sailing. And then no, something else comes along. I want you to be okay with that. And yes, you can strive for balance, but know that it's unlikely that you're going to make it because it's honestly, it's not there all the time. Especially if you are taking care of little kids or elderly parents. That's just the way it is, And I think chasing balance is a fool's errand. It really is. Because then we are putting ourselves down and saying, well, I can't really do this, and I'm supposed to do this, and I'm supposed to do that. And that's just dumb. You're not supposed to do anything. You're supposed to do the best that you can with what you got at the time. If that means at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're in a bathtub with a hot kid and you're loving them up and it's just a miserable situation and the child's crying, you are there full-heartedly, right? And what about with your elderly parents? Same deal. Same thing. Because that's who we are and that's how we show up in our lives. So don't kick yourself for not having this balance because most of us don't. And number 3 is you got to create a vision for your whole life. This is why I wrote the Carousel of Crazy, y'all, because the Carousel of Crazy has put us into this place of only looking at our worth through the lens of wearing a pair of size fill in the blank jeans. And if that isn't the biggest pile of crap you've ever heard in your life, it is true, isn't it? But that is how our culture has conditioned us to live our lives. We have to stop this craziness because our lives are so much more than a pair of jeans or the color of our lipstick. Amen? So much more. But if we have our whole focus on this one thing, then we're missing out on the sweetness and the wholeness of what life could be, the possibilities of what our lives could be. We have spent so much emotional capital on putting our worth on the size of our butts. We've spent a lot of money coming out of our wallets. How much have you spent? How much have you spent on crazy supplements that keep you wired for 2 days straight? Crazy books that tell you that, you got to do this and you've got to do that. And if you don't, you're crazy. And if it doesn't work, it's awful. And you are too, with all the bimbos out there and all the nuts stuff that you read and watch and all these gurus out there. We've seen it all. And what about your life? What about the rest of your life? Isn't there more to it than just a pair of jeans? And I want to get you to this place of creating a vision that you see your life with every single thing, that you see the relationships that you have and the sweetness in those friendships and your marriages and with your children, and being absolutely present with that. And that your worth is not predicated to what your scale says. That's what I want to see for you. Create a vision for all of your life. And number 4 this is absolutely critical, is to create and establish your rituals. These are the bookends of your life, in that when you start in the morning, first thing in the morning, and you're writing out in your journal, here you go, right here. This is it. Take back your life journal, 12 weeks at a time. You've taken the time to create 3 goals that mean something to you. And it's all about your life, not one thing, everything. You've taken the time to write out things that you have gratitude for every single morning. And that you take the time every day to journal and to say how you're feeling, and you meditate. All of these things help you to focus and to draw into the center of who you are, the core of who you are, the core of who God touches and loves on. When we do that and we take the time to do that, we can stop the over-emoting. We can stop digging up and piling on. And we can stop what, like Dr. Jennifer said, right? We can stop the massive displacement of psychological dirt from one place to another. We can stop doing that because looking is no longer fearful. Seeing what's there is no longer fearful. It's just part of what your life is about. I want the gift. The one thing that I have really have enjoyed, I will say, especially for the last 5 years of my life, has been just really every single day is getting up in the morning and loving my life exactly how it is. Perfect? Absolutely not, but certainly excellent. A good relationship, good relationships all around. A family that I absolutely adore, friends that I absolutely adore, a work that I love, working with people that I love and care about, and having you here show up and just turn up. My life is an absolute overabundance, overflowing with love and gratitude. Every one of us can create that. Every single one of us can create that. But it all starts with stopping the hysteria and instead starting to look at the things that maybe aren't so fun to look at, and start looking at the ability to lead your life in a way that's intelligent, that's thought-provoking, that's fun, and that's going to connect you to the people that you want to be connected to. That's going to help you to love more and create more. This is how we get out of this hand-wringy thing. And this is how we start living that abundant, vibrant life that we talk about all the time. Because it's not at the end of that rainbow where the size 6 jeans live. It's on the path to, if that's what your goal is. We get to do that. We get off the carousel of crazy and we start accepting our lives as we are right now today. We start loving our lives as it is right now today, because I'm going to promise you that every single person that's here, hello, Sarah, by the way, every single person that is here has at least 3 things that they can have gratitude for first thing in the morning. Every single person that is here has something in their lives that they want and would devote themselves to. They think it's out of reach, but it's not. All I'm saying is that if we can stop this hand-wringy excursion that we oftentimes throw down as our life, If we could stop walking on eggshells and having other people walk on eggshells around us and start understanding that we can connect with the core of who we are and the core of who He is, we can start seeing who we are and whose we are and start living our life on that purpose instead of the crazy making. What do you think of that idea? Huh? Are you ready to leave the molehills and the mountains behind and create the life that you so desperately want? I am. I'm all in. Peace be with you. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on TikTok for daily tips to help support your most vibrant life. And remember, you are the author of your own story. Until next time.